At my dad's 60th birthday, he toasted and said, "All of this exists thanks to me, and someday, it'll all belong to your brother." My brother smiled. My mom smirked. I just sat there quiet, because they had no idea I bought the house years ago. The business, legally mine. The cars, under my LLC. That night, I left a folder labeled, Revised Ownership Documents. Can you imagine spending your entire life as a ghost in your own family? Being the one who quietly holds everything together, only to be completely erased from the story? Well, that was my life. Until one night, at my dad's 60th birthday party, he stood up and gave a toast that shattered my world and forced me to finally show them just how much they'd underestimated the invisible sun. What the hell happened next? My name's Darren, I'm 34, and for as long as I can remember, I haven't really been part of my family, at least not in the way they define it. To them, I was always the quiet one, the background guy. Not flashy, not loud, not sentimental. Just present. Always present. I was the one who'd write the checks when there was an emergency, the one who'd fix the messes no one talked about, and somehow, I still ended up the one they'd ignore at birthdays and weddings. My mom would say I was too private. My brother, Kevin, he'd call me boring. My dad, he used to call me practical, but that tone shifted over the years. Eventually, he'd just say I didn't have a spark. And somewhere along the way, they convinced themselves I was just another piece in their picture-perfect family portrait. Necessary, maybe, but never central. Not like Kevin. Kevin's 2 years younger than me, and he's been the golden child since he was in diapers. Honestly, I'm not even bitter about it anymore. It just is what it is. He was the one my mom bragged about at book club, the one my dad trained to take over the business. Even though I was the one working behind the scenes since college, managing the accounts, the legal side, the licensing, everything. Kevin couldn't read a quarterly report if it was printed in cartoon font, but he knew how to charm a room, and to my family, that was what mattered. He was the face. I was the guy behind the curtain, making sure the lights stayed on. I never argued. Not once. Not when Dad gave Kevin a company car I'd leased under my name. Not when Mom told neighbors Kevin had really turned things around at the business after I'd quietly fixed a massive IRS issue 2 years ago. Not even when Kevin started calling himself CEO, despite the fact that the business has legally been mine since Dad signed it over, thinking it was just for taxes. I smiled. I nodded. I made sure payroll didn't bounce, and that everyone else could keep pretending it wasn't about ego. Honestly, I didn't care about the title or the credit. I just didn't want to see the whole thing fall apart. Dad built the company from nothing, and even if he never acknowledged my role, I wasn't going to let it collapse. It was supposed to be temporary, a legal technicality after Dad's back surgery when we had to shift things around for liability reasons. He handed over ownership to me without really looking at the paperwork. I figured we'd revisit it later, but later never came. Instead, Dad started acting like he was back in charge, ignoring every update I sent him. Kevin stopped showing up entirely, except when he needed to schmooze a client or impress a girlfriend. And my mom, she just kept reminding me that Kevin was the future of his family, every dinner, every phone call. As if I was the past. As if I hadn't kept them all afloat, including the mortgage on the very house we all gathered in last week for Dad's 60th birthday. That house. God, that house. It used to be my childhood home, but my parents sold it 10 years ago when things got tight. Then 2 years later, after Kevin blew through the money they made from the sale and begged for help, I bought it back. Quietly. Under my LLC. I let them move in, let them believe some miracle investor had given them a sweetheart deal. They never asked questions, just moved in like it was owed to them. Mom even had the nerve to call it our house, in front of her friends last Christmas, while I was the one shoveling the snow outside. So, when Dad's big birthday bash rolled around, I already had a knot in my stomach. Not because I didn't want to celebrate him, but because I knew exactly how the night was going to go. I knew the speech would come, I just didn't know how far he'd take it. The house was full of extended family and friends I hadn't seen in years. Kevin stood at the center of it all, holding court like he always did, laughing too loudly, telling stories that somehow made him the hero every time. My mom flitted from guest to guest, bragging about the imported food, the wine, the caterers, all of which I'd paid for through my company. Dad sat in the living room like a king on a throne, wearing a new watch I'd sent anonymously a month before. He never even asked who it was from, probably assumed it was Kevin. I kept mostly to the edge of the room, played the role, the quiet son, the background guy. I didn't even get introduced to half the guests. One woman asked me if I was Kevin's assistant. I smiled and said, something like that. Then came a toast. It started normal enough. A few jokes, some more memories. People clapped and laughed. Kevin stood beside him, arms slung over his shoulder, basking in the attention like it was his birthday. Then Dad raised his glass a little higher, and the room got quiet. Everything you see here, he said, voice loud and clear, exists because of me. The house, the business, the cars, this family. There were polite nods, some claps. Then he added, and when I'm gone, it all goes to Kevin. He's earned it. The silence after that was louder than anything. Kevin Kevin grinned. Mom gave a little smirk. And I just sat there, still like a statue carved from disbelief. Not anger, just an ache, familiar, dull, and now sharpened to a point. I looked at my dad, really looked at him, and I realized he wasn't trying to be cruel. He just genuinely believed it. In his mind, none of this could exist without him, not even the things I'd built in his name. In his eyes, I was just the help. That was the moment it all crystallized for me. All the little slights, the ignored emails, the unchecked receipts, the way Kevin had parked his company car diagonally on the lawn like he owned the place. They didn't just take me for granted. They erased me. They'd rewritten the story entirely, cast me as an extra in my own life. But I didn't react. Not then. I smiled. I lifted my glass. And I toasted with the rest of them, because the moment wasn't about arguing, it was about revealing. So, after the cake had been cut and the guests started filing out, I walked upstairs to the guest room where I'd been staying for the weekend. I grabbed the black folder I tucked into my bag the night before, a simple leather case with neatly tabbed documents, deeds, registrations, ownership records, signatures. I brought it downstairs, and without a word, I set it gently on the dining table, right beside the half-empty champagne flutes and the forgotten birthday cards. The label on the folder was simple: updated ownership records. Then I walked out the front door without saying a word, and I waited. I didn't go far, just around the corner, actually. There's a quiet park bench at the end of the cul-de-sac, half hidden by an overgrown hedge, where I used to sit with my headphones after school. I hadn't been there in years, but I remembered every crack in the pavement. I sat down, let the cool night air settle over me, and pulled out my phone. I wasn't watching them exactly, but I was waiting. I knew what I'd left behind. I knew the weight of that folder, and the silence it would detonate the moment someone opened it. 15 minutes later, the text came from Kevin. "What is this?" "Dad's freaking out." I didn't reply. I just watched the typing dots come and go. Then came another one. "Tell me this is a joke." Then the call. I let it ring out. Then another one from Mom. I let that one ring too. The thing is, they never asked. That's what always stuck with me. Not once in all these years did they ever stop and ask how the bills got paid, or who signed the checks, or why the mortgage company had a different mailing address. They didn't want to know. They just liked the illusion, and I kept it intact for longer than I should have. I stayed out there until the porch lights flicked off one by one, until the house, my house, quieted down. By the time I came back in, the folder was gone from the table. Dad was in the kitchen, leaning over the counter with both hands pressed flat, like he needed it to hold him up. He didn't look at me when I walked in. Neither did Mom, who was sitting at the island, clutching a cup of untouched tea like it was the only thing tethering her to the floor. Kevin, though. Kevin came storming out of the hallway, folder in hand, papers spilling from the sides like it had already been rifled through by frantic fingers. "You think this is funny?" he said, voice sharp. I didn't answer, just looked at him. "You can't do this!" he snapped, waving the folder like a weapon. This is ours. This house, this business, everything. You don't get to just rewrite history." I walked past him and poured myself a glass of water, took my time. "I didn't rewrite anything," I said. "I just filed it properly." He opened his mouth to speak, but Dad cut in from the kitchen, voice low, heavy. "Is it true?" I turned to face him. His hands were still braced on the counter, his eyes hadn't moved. "Yes," I said. "The house, the business, the cars, everything Kevin's been showing off like a prize, they're mine. Registered, owned, maintained by me." Mom finally spoke. "But why?" I blinked at her. "Why?" I echoed. "Because no one else could. When the IRS came knocking. When the accounts were frozen. When Kevin maxed out 3 company credit cards in a month. Who fixed it? Who paid off the vendors so you could keep hosting brunches like nothing happened? Who signed the refinancing papers on this place when your credit score didn't qualify you for a loan?" Mom's lip trembled, but I wasn't angry. I was done being angry. I was just exhausted. "You didn't even ask," I said quietly. "You just assumed I'd keep showing up, keep cleaning up, keep disappearing into the background." Dad finally looked at me, really looked. "Why didn't you tell us?" That made me laugh. Not loudly, just one of those bitter little exhales that happens when something sad finally becomes funny. "Tell you," I said. "The last time I tried to explain something, Kevin interrupted me to take credit for the last quarter's numbers, the ones I personally reconciled. You gave him a bottle of scotch. You told me to take notes." Kevin turned red. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's not. You think this makes you better than us," he sputtered. "You think this folder makes you the boss." I took a step closer, calm measured. "No," I said. "It just makes me the owner." And in that silence, for the first time in my entire life, I watched my father blink like he was seeing me for the first time. Kevin dropped the folder onto the floor and stormed off. Mom called after him, but her voice cracked halfway through. Dad sat down at the kitchen table like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. And I walked over to the fireplace, picked up the old family photo Mom loved to keep there, the one from Kevin's college graduation. I wasn't in it. I'd been the one taking the picture. I set it face down on the mantel. Then I turned to my parents and said quietly, "There's one more thing I wanted to let you know." I paused, let the weight of the moment sit. But before I could speak, the door behind me burst open, and there he was, Kevin. Kevin's face was flushed, his hair disheveled like he'd yanked at it all the way down the hallway. He was holding his laptop open, the screen still glowing. He didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes locked on me like I just pulled the rug out from under his whole life. And maybe in a way I had, but I wasn't ready for what he said next. "You revoked my access," he breathed. "To everything." I didn't respond, just waited. The CRM system, the payroll dashboard, the company email, it's all gone. My login doesn't work. My phone's been blowing up. I've got 15 employees asking why their accounts are frozen. He stepped forward, voice rising. "What did you do, Darren?" I set my glass down on the counter, the sound of it tapping the granite louder than anything else in the room. "I took back what was mine," I said. "You can't just lock me out of my job." "It's not your job," I said. "It never was." He looked stunned for a moment, like he'd just been punched in the stomach. "You're joking, right? This is some kind of punishment." "No," I said. "This is me correcting a mistake." "You were the mistake," he spat. "You were never supposed to be part of this. You were always just the background guy. Dad trained me. This company was always going to be mine. You think you can just swoop in and take it because you paid a few bills." My father flinched. "A few bills?" I repeated slowly. "Kevin, you were this close to being sued for breach of contract twice. You didn't even know we had to carry liability insurance until I put you on a call with a lawyer. You've been playing CEO on social media while I've been running the company from behind the scenes. If anything, I gave you too much access." He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "And let me be very clear, I didn't revoke anything tonight. Your access was set to expire 2 weeks ago when you stopped showing up to Monday calls and started charging spa weekends to the business account." He looked to Dad for backup. "Tell him," Kevin said. "Tell him this is insane." But Dad didn't say a word. Not yet. He just sat there, eyes flicking between us like he was watching a tennis match he didn't buy tickets for. "I'm not shutting down the business," I added, more to Dad than to Kevin. "I'm just shutting you out. Permanently." "Over what?" Kevin shouted. "Because I got a little recognition for once." "Recognition," I repeated. "Kevin, you gave a speech at last quarter's meeting thanking yourself for increased profits that came directly from a software automation tool I spent 3 months building. You don't even know the name of half our vendors. You used to forward contract requests to Mom to print for you because you couldn't figure out how to sign a PDF. That's not true. Go check your sent folder." Kevin was breathing hard, fists clenched, jaw tight. He looked at me like he didn't even recognize the person standing in front of him. But that's because he didn't. None of them did. They didn't know I'd stayed up for weeks fixing a malware breach that Kevin had caused by downloading pirated music on the company laptop. They didn't know I'd paid for the roof after the storm last year, or that the reason the accountant never called back was because I was the accountant. They didn't know anything, because I never told them. Because I thought keeping the peace was more important than being seen. And maybe for a while it was, but not anymore. Mom finally spoke again, her voice shaking. "Sweetheart, maybe we misunderstood." "No," I said. "You didn't misunderstand. You just didn't care to know. You all liked having a scapegoat when things went wrong, and a shadow when things went right." Dad stood up then, slowly, not angrily, just like he was realizing how deep the ground had shifted under his feet. "So what now?" he asked. I met his eyes. "Now you live in a house I own. You drive a car registered under my LLC. The business you keep bragging about? It's mine. And if you want to keep pretending that Kevin earned any of this, I suggest you take a good look at those documents I left on the table." He looked down, jaw tight. "I never meant to insult you, Darren. I just thought Kevin would carry the torch." I nodded. "He can't carry a torch if he doesn't know where the matches are." The room was dead quiet until Kevin's voice cut through again, lower this time, more desperate. "You can't just erase me." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in years I didn't feel guilt or resentment or even anger. I just felt done. "I didn't erase you, Kevin," I said quietly. "You did that all on your own." And then Dad's phone lit up on the counter. A new email notification from the legal team. Subject line: "Formal transfer of executive authority confirmation attached." He reached for it, opened it, read it, and his eyes widened. He looked up at me, mouth half open. "Darren, this isn't just the company." I nodded. "No, it's everything." And that's when the front door suddenly swung open again. I turned. It was Uncle Richard, with an envelope in his hand. Uncle Richard wasn't the dramatic type. He was my dad's older brother, retired, calm, the kind of guy who brought his own folding chair to barbecues and read contracts like they were bedtime stories. I hadn't seen him all night, and I wasn't expecting to see him now, let alone walk through the front door uninvited with a manila envelope clutched in one hand and a grim look on his face. He looked around the room slowly, at Kevin, still clutching his laptop, at my dad, sitting pale and stiff behind the kitchen island, at me, standing there like I'd just set off a bomb. He walked over without a word, laid the envelope flat on the counter, and said, "I thought I'd let you know in person before the rest of the board finds out in the morning." Dad blinked. "The board?" Uncle Richard nodded. "You remember the quarterly review we postponed? I just got off the phone with the advisory committee." "What are you talking about?" Kevin asked, voice cracking. Uncle Richard turned to me then, gave me a slow, measured nod, a gesture I hadn't seen from anyone in this family in a long time. Not respect, not pity, just recognition. "Darren submitted the full audit you asked me to keep confidential," he said to Dad. "I didn't want to believe it at first, I really didn't, but it checks out. Every transfer, every invoice, every asset shift. He didn't hide a thing. He tapped the envelope. This is a copy of what's going out to the rest of the shareholders tomorrow." My dad's hand hovered over the envelope like it burned to the touch. I didn't ask for an audit." "No," I said, "but the bylaws you wrote in 1993 let any majority shareholder request one if they feel there's been financial misrepresentation. Which as of last month I am." Dad turned to Richard in disbelief. "You let him do this?" Richard shook his head. "No, you did. You signed over 71% of company equity to Darren 5 years ago when he refinanced your buyout plan. You just didn't bother reading the clauses. You assumed he was cleaning up your books out of loyalty. I didn't flinch. And I was. But loyalty doesn't mean silence forever." Kevin looked like he'd been punched in the chest. "You're lying." "No," Richard said, voice flat. "He's not. Silence." My mom looked between us all, eyes filling with tears, not from understanding, but from the sudden, painful realization that the world she'd constructed around her golden boy and her untouchable husband was collapsing from the inside out. "You were always so quiet," she whispered, like it was an accusation. I turned to her. Maybe if someone had listened when I wasn't. She looked away. Dad finally tore open the envelope, scanned the papers inside. I watched the color drain from his face as he reached page after page. Tax filings, asset declarations, legal filings, even the board memo Richard had already prepared. Every page was a brick in the wall I'd spent years building in silence, stone by stone, while they all thought I was just helping out. Kevin leaned against the wall like he might slide down it. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said. "I'm cleaning it up. You can't just take everything from us." "I didn't take anything. You handed it to me because none of you paid attention. You just assumed I was happy being invisible. And maybe I was, but invisible doesn't mean incompetent." Kevin stepped forward, desperate now. Okay, look, I messed up. I'll fix it, okay? You want me out of the company? Fine, I'll leave. Just don't take the house. Don't leave Mom and Dad with nothing." I studied him. There it was, the switch, the plea, the fear. "Do you know how many years I stayed silent because of that?" I said quietly, "Because I didn't want to leave them with nothing." I looked at my father. You could have sat me down at any point, asked me what I was doing, what I needed, what I wanted. He didn't respond. He just looked small. Not angry, not proud, just small. "You said this all exists because of you," I said. "But if that were true, it would be gone by now." Uncle Richard cleared his throat. "The board's reviewing a proposal Darren submitted. He's restructuring everything, dissolving old debts, shifting assets. He's even offering early retirement packages to long-term staff." Dad's eyes shot up. "You're firing my people?" "No," I said. "I'm giving them a choice. Stay and get paid better, or leave with full pension and a bonus. Unlike Kevin, I don't believe in milking loyalty dry." Richard added, "You should be thankful, really. If Darren hadn't stepped in when he did, the company would have collapsed 2 years ago. You'd be in bankruptcy court, and Kevin would be live-streaming your foreclosure." That finally hit home. Mom gasped softly. Kevin sank into a chair. "I'm not evicting anyone," I said. "The house stays in the family. Technically, you can live here for as long as you want, rent-free. But it's not yours. It never was. And the business?" Dad asked quietly. "I'll keep running it," I said. "Properly, legally, profitably. But it won't be under the family name anymore. That name doesn't mean what it used to." I walked to the mantel and picked up the family photo I'd flipped earlier, turned it back over, looked at it for a long moment. "I used to think I had to earn a place in this picture," I said. "But I realized something. I was always in the frame. You just cropped me out." Dad swallowed hard. Kevin didn't look up. Mom started to cry. And I felt nothing but peace. Not smugness. Not victory, just relief. Like I'd finally dropped the weight I'd been carrying since I was a teenager. The weight of silence, of being useful but never valued, trusted but never respected. I turned to Uncle Richard. "Thank you for backing me." He smiled slightly. "You didn't need my backing, Darren. You just needed to stop hiding." I nodded. Then I walked toward the front door, grabbing my overnight bag on the way. Kevin stood suddenly. "Where are you going?" "Home," I said. "To my other house." "You're leaving after all this?" "I didn't do this to stay," I said. "I did this to fix it." He opened his mouth again, but I raised a hand. "One more thing," I said. "The new HR policies go into effect Monday. You're no longer allowed to charge personal expenses to the business, and I've reassigned your title to... To what? He asked bitterly. I looked him in the eye. To unemployed. His mouth dropped open. I turned, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. The night was cool, quiet. For the first time in years, I wasn't a shadow walking behind someone else's spotlight. I was just me. Not the disappointment, not the wallet, not the invisible one. Just Aaron. And I was finally free. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever felt completely invisible to the people who should see you most? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.